Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this February 20th, 2024. Tonight we have special returning guests and our good friend Darren Evens. You've seen him on Ghost Adventures. He's been on this show a couple times before. And tonight we're talking more about the Ouija board, as well as updates on the Zozo phenomenon. Always a popular topic, always a little unsettling, and we have got you covered for the next 3 hours. Don't go anywhere. Everybody, once again, I am Bishop Bryan Ouellette, your host, with co-host Jamie Wolf. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
I'm doing well, and you?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much. And I want to also give a shout out to our wonderful volunteer moderators, Paula and Danielle, who's under the name Mystic. You'll see her in the various chats. We also have, of course, Brandon and Father Chris, who will be following along all of your questions on all the various platforms that we're simulcasting on. Once again, Instagram would not take the feed. Okay, we tried, and I made sure I double checked that we did everything right. For some reason, the feed just would not go to Instagram for the second time. So I think we're going to have to do some kind of test run at some point and figure out why it is not accepting it. It accepted it in the test, but for some reason, when we go live with the show, that one will not take it. So we're not on Instagram, but we are on Facebook, we are on Spreaker, we are on Twitch. And we're on Twitter, Jamie Wolf's Twitter, yep. And of course YouTube, where most of you will find us, of course. And we have got quite a show. But before we get to tonight's topic and everything, we have liturgical libations, and this is one that again we had last season, but we didn't get very far with it. So we're gonna give it another go here. This is McKellen, 12-year-old.
This is all you. I do enjoy this one. But you know the notes and the profile and...
Well, McKellen...
Baby dram?
Yes, a small one is fine. Yes, thank you. Still have to engineer the show. I don't need to get too relaxed.
I'll drink your half.
McKellen always, no matter what iteration it is, it always has that distinctive McKellen taste. There's really nothing that is like it. There's no whiskey that has
Beautiful
it.
amber color.
Oh, yeah. Cheers. Yeah. See, you can tell McKellen.
Yep. Not a Scotch drinker, but I'll drink that all day.
It's a good one. It's good. A little hot, but it's good. Okay. So, joining us, of course, from Australia, we have Father Chris. How you doing tonight, Father?
I'm very jealous of your McKellen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Even the 12-year-old is really good.
It's very good.
I'll drink a spot for you, Father.
There's nothing quite like McKellen. I've got quite a few different ones, and I like them all. Mm-hmm. I do. I like them all. I've never had a McKellen.
I had an 18-year-old that I polished off last year with a friend. So
18 is wonderful. 18
yeah.
actually tastes
Smooth.
just like the 12, only it's much smoother. It's not as warm going down. That's
Well,
really-
we had a ruinous evening because he also brought around a bottle of Penfolds Grange, which is the premium wine of Australia, and so it was, I think it was.
I remember that.
2004. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that
event.
event. Yeah, that was good.
It was a good night.
It was. It's always a good night. Yeah.
But today, as ever, I know I look so parsimonious on this show because I'm drinking water again. But
Well, it's the
I just
morning.
remind you, it's noon here.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, just turn noon.
Okay, so at 12:05.
Yeah, but
go
don't
ahead.
confuse me with a Puritan because I'm not that.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And calling in also from Tennessee, we have Brandon Milam. How are you, Brandon?
Brandon.
I'm pretty good, and you can keep that drink. I got my own tonight.
Very good.
Dr. Pepper.
No, that looks like a monster.
It's Monster.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, it's a monster.
He needs
I
the
got
energy.
leftovers in
I'll
my
say a
fridge.
prayer for your kidneys, Brandon.
It'll be fun.
Actually, in the latest nanny state craziness in Australia, they yesterday banned. We have Hard Solo, which is a lemonade that's alcoholic, and they've now banned any other sodas from being made alcoholic.
What's
That's
going
been
on down
banned
there?
by
Because
law in
I have to
Australia.
say, it's like the impression that America has always had of Australia for the last several decades was that, anything goes, it's really laid back and just anybody can just do anything and, get away with it.
Crocodile Dundee, right?
Hey, right,
It's
yeah.
Nick Dundee, do what you like.
Yeah, it's not like that at
by
all
the way,
now.
Paul Hogan very much is a libertarian hero, but no, it's. I mean, I moved here from England to get away from the nanny state, but they love their regulations here. Everything is licensed. You have to have a Cert 2 in everything. So it's it really is a very regulated place, but they've got sunshine and beer and a relatively hedonistic lifestyle, so no one complains.
Yeah, that'll keep the
Until
masses
it's
from
too late.
rebelling. Just have good beer.
It is what it is. I want to just remind all of you viewers, if you enjoy what we do here, this is a church-sponsored show. Even though we are not a church show, it is church-sponsored, and we try to make it educational as well as entertaining, trying to hit that perfect balance. So we talk about all the topics that are on your mind and a lot of the topics that other churches will never cover. So if you value this, if you find value in what we do, whether it be the ministry itself or this show, or if you find it an entertaining show to tune into every week, please consider supporting it. It's completely church sponsored and financed. We don't have any outside sponsorship for this show. So your donations are what keep it on the air. So please keep that in mind. You can go to nicoland.org or esotericcatholic.org and click the donation button to provide a donation. One-time donations are always appreciative and are fantastic, but what the church really needs, honestly, is dedicated monthly pledges that are consistent, because getting consistent pledges is always a challenge, and it's difficult to draft a budget and do things when you don't know whether or not people are going to hold true to their pledges. So if you find it within yourself to support the show because you enjoy it, please go over to that website and provide a donation. The moderators will put it into the various chats. They'll direct links, so look for that. And of course, we'll be taking your questions from chat. I know that a lot of you prefer the chat room, so that's where why we have so many moderators, so that we can make sure we don't miss anything and try to get to them all. But a little later in the show, we're going to open up the lines, and then you can call in if you would like to. We always prefer that you call in if you have a question, because it's much easier and I think more interesting for the rest of the audience to hear your voice and to interact with you personally instead of just reading your question off of the chat. But it's your choice, and you've got both of those options available to you. All right, let's get started here on this first segment with questions from the ether. Brandon, what's our first one for this evening?
So the first question comes from April. She said, on the Open Lines, Open Topics episode that we did recently, you were talking about how to be able to access the Akashic records. How do you do that, or how can one learn to do that?
Okay, well, accessing what is called the Akashic records, that's the New Agey sort of metaphysical term for what Carl Jung called the collective unconscious. I personally don't see a difference between the two. I think collective unconscious might sound a little more academic, so I will go with that one for now. But Akashic records is fine. It's accessible through the various practices that we have available for conducting inner work. So meditation, of course, is going to be paramount here. Even prayer, particularly the more esoteric versions of prayer, like contemplative prayer, or even religious meditation, which is distinctive from Buddhist or New Age meditation or yoga meditation. But even yoga itself is also a way to access these. Divination is the primary vehicle through which this communication takes place. So, when you're using any kind of tool that employs the laws of synchronicity in order to work, you are essentially accessing the collective unconscious. Now, just because you're accessing it does not mean that you're accessing it correctly or accurately. Just because you're getting information from the collective unconscious doesn't mean that any of that information is useful. So there is a certain amount of skill that is required in order to do this well. But those that have the natural proclivity, we tend to call psychics, empaths, mediums, all of these people that are that have these special talents that are, sort of like the stars of the paranormal field, are essentially doing just that. They're accessing the Akashic records, collective unconscious, and pulling data from it. And that data, if they know how to use it and interpret it and to actually get a clear connection with it, can actually tell you anything you want to know about anything that might be on your mind.
Bishop, just a quick question on that.
Yeah.
Do you think obviously some people are really good at synthesizing information, I've known people who are academics who are just really good at studying, swatting up on a subject and regurgitating it. But I think, I don't say this to blow my own trumpet, but it's just as prideful not to acknowledge your gifts. I think one of my gifts in life has been obviously an interest and exposure in the great myths of humanity and philosophy and all of that. And then, so first of all, having the interest to gather that information, and then having the ability to synthesize that in conversations with people. Do you think that's a similar kind of process?
I do. I think that ultimately what we are, and this gets very esoteric, of course, and maybe a bit beyond the question, but to kind of bridge the two, your question with this question, which they are absolutely related, I kind of have to go a little more on the esoteric side with the answer. And that is, we are essentially projections, physical, corporeal projection. So just imagine if you have you're in the movies, all right, and they put the film into the movie projector, and then they start the film, and then you get to watch the movie. That's an incorporeal projection onto a screen. It's all done with light. We're a physical projection of this incorporeal database that we call the collective unconscious, made up of various patterns of archetypes that produce various effects. And that is essentially sort of the shadow realm of reality, which is, in an esoteric Christian sense, what the fallen world really is. In conventional Christianity, the fallen world is sort of like creation is this it's the same creation, and that's a valid interpretation too. But esoteric Christianity looks at the fallen world more as though we have now entered into an illusion of our own manifestation, an imperfect manifestation, because we don't know how to manifest and use the faculties of creation that are part of our nature because we're made in God's image. He can do it perfectly, we cannot, and so therefore we create this shadow realm of projections. And this is where it bridges the gap between Eastern philosophy, where you get into the Hindu Maya, and the Buddhist understanding of how, essentially nothing really exists. The only truth of existence is actually non-beingness, which is what gets us back to removing all of the attachments, so that once you've removed them all, then what remains is the absolute truth, which is ineffable and beyond comprehension, which is very similar to the beatific vision. I mean, you can keep going back and forth, and they're really just different ways of expressing it.
It also sounds like a post Tower of Babel reality, where we're drawing on the fragments of these. I mean, what Jung would call archetypes, right? And because I just think that part of what makes a good pastor, a good counselor, a good insightful friend, whatever it may be, is often, I mean, I think sometimes people think I can read their minds. And in a way I can, but it's not because I've got some extrasensory perception. It's because an awareness of archetypes, of paths of thought, of how people with certain traits respond to the world.
Well, that's also your law enforcement training, because I use it too.
Well, true. Yeah. That's true too.
You can read. You read people. Yeah.
But I mean, all of that, even as mundane as like law enforcement instinct, is a type of connecting with the collective unconscious. It's just because it's being done in a law enforcement capacity. No one really looks at it and says, "Ooh, that's spooky paranormal stuff," or it's like all psychic. It's more matter of fact than that, because it is matter of fact. It's just when it falls into the realm of predicting the future or knowing something about the past that you couldn't possibly have known because you weren't there. That's when it becomes sort of fascinating to us, because it's like, how can they know? But they know, because everything that's ever happened and ever will happen is all collected there.
It's all patterns.
We are just caught into the stream of time, but the what we're calling the collective unconscious or Akashic records exists outside of time. Therefore, every moment that ever was and ever will be is already imprinted there, and one can collect the information, kind of like almost like time travel in a way. Only you're not physically going anywhere. You're just simply being able to review the data, and then if you know how to do it, you can pull it.
You're just tapping in.
It is tapping in.
Literally.
The problem is that the Akashic records are also a massive mirror of reflectivity, and so our desires and expectations can get reflected back if we don't know how to tell the difference between an authentic connection and one that is really just based upon either fear or anticipation. And the biggest problem that we have with psychics and mediums and using tarot cards and that type of thing is that more often than not, people don't know what they are doing, and all they're reading is what they either fear to be true or what they wish to be true, and neither one is actually authentic. So people with their hindsight biases tend to just dismiss the times they're wrong, and as long as they get a couple things right, they're like, see, I knew it, and it's like, but you only saw the ones that you got right. You didn't see all the ones that you got wrong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
bias.
It is, yes. And so I would say that the only time you can really say that you're dealing with an authentic psychic or medium is if they can consistently get higher than 80% accuracy, because that's going to be more than statistical chance of 50-50. It's more than just, anybody can guess right half the time. I mean, that's going to just be statistically, expected. But if you're getting up to the 80s and 90s, that's when we say, okay, there's something going on here. That's the connection point. So when I train people,
I had a weird thing. I had a weird thing happen to me.
Oh yeah,
2 weeks ago. I'd forgotten about this. I should have mentioned it last week. Where I was playing Trivial Pursuit. Okay, with there were three of us playing Trivial Pursuit, and every time I said out when I was rolling the dice, if I said what number I wanted, it came the whole game.
Yeah,
the whole game.
Yeah,
that's weird, right?
It is, yeah.
Every single time I said, if I didn't say it, obviously it was just random, but every time I said it, I must have said it a dozen more times. Every time I said it, the number came up.
When I used to live
How
in
does that
Las
happen?
Vegas, I would consistently just be walking through the casino to go to a restaurant or whatever. And I would go, of course, you have to always go through the gaming areas to get to anything. And I'd pass by a roulette wheel, and inevitably, I would be walking by from time to time, and instantly I would just know what the next number was going to be. I just knew it. And I would stop and I'd wait to see. And sure enough, more often than 50% of the time, so definitely a connection, I was right. Unfortunately, I could never translate that to winning money, because anytime I would get that inclination and put the money down, then it wouldn't come up. It was only when there was nothing at risk and I didn't have any actual investment into the experience, when the experience was pure, that I could actually make the connection. Otherwise, I would start imprinting my own wishes or fears, of course, wishing to win, fear of losing, into the experience, and it would contaminate the effect. And that's the hardest part with dealing with the Akashic records. And that's the hardest part of finding an authentic medium, is that, a lot of people who call themselves mediums have made a connection one or two times, and now they're like, I'm a medium, and it's like not really. And a lot of times when they're thinking that they're actually communicating with spirits, and I think that's going to be one of our next questions, because Brandon gave me a little preview of what's to come. I guess I'll save it for that question. Let's go ahead and get to that question, Brandon, because it really kind of leads into what we're talking about.
So that comes from Danielle. If mediums are talking with the Akashic record interfaces, not actual spirits as we have theorized, and the actual spirits don't go to heaven immediately until everyone has passed, where do they go in the meantime? Considering you had said there isn't really such a thing as reincarnation as New Agers might view it.
Correct. Buddhist and Hindu concepts of reincarnation are quite different, particularly Buddhists, are quite different from the New Age or theosophical concepts that we tend to take for granted in the West, and we think they're the same thing when they're really not. It's not really a continuity of self; it's a continuity of energy, and that's about it. There's nothing that really constitutes a self, and that's where the Buddhist doctrines of anatta that we've talked about before. So if we're going to, this is actually requires a little bit of an esoteric, as a metaphysical, as well as a theological commentary. Now, again, there's different perspectives, of course, depending upon who you talk to, and mainstream Christianity is going to have, I think, its own bias from the Middle Ages on this answer. But as a bishop, I firmly stand that nothing has changed since Jesus walked the earth in terms of what the afterlife includes. I don't think anything's been changed in this respect. So at the time of Jesus, in the world of the Jews at the time of Jesus, there was no hell in terms of a place of eternal punishment. Not in the sense of this constant torture from demons that are just, stabbing you with pitchforks and, for all eternity. That was from the Middle Ages. That idea of hell came straight out of the Middle Ages, 1,000 years later. Okay, maybe the Dark Ages started to develop it, so maybe like 700 or 800 years, but still, it was a long time from the times of Jesus and the Jewish world that he came from. Sheol, which is the Jewish word for hell, identical in almost every way to Hades in the Greek world. The pagans had the same thing, also meaning hell. Okay, was not a place of torture and suffering as much as it is a place of basically unconsciousness or increasing states of unconsciousness to dissipation. All right. And in the pagan world, if you were really favored by the gods, then they might bring you up to the Elysium fields or something. And then you could kind of live in their immortality, which is a lot like what we kind of have in the Christian world, honestly. It's similar to that. Okay. In order for God to do this to a mortal in the pagan world, they had to impart part of themselves to you. Well, that's what Jesus does in the Eucharist. So there's parallel. And I'm not saying that Christianity adopted this from paganism. What I'm trying to say is there is a universal perennial truth here, and just everybody's got a little piece of the puzzle, and they're all kind of talking about it from their own perspective, but it all means the same thing. Right. But hell,
I think where Christianity's gone, or where the church has gone wrong, certainly post Reformation, but probably before that, really. I mean, post Thomism, I had to correct somebody once who was a superior to me in the church I was in at the time, because he very much had this a good guy, by the way, who meant well, but he very much had this sort of what you would say conservative evangelical theology. Theology is too generous a word. Where sorry, that was really
no, it's true though. It's true.
But
you're just being honest.
Where and this might be familiar to some of the listeners, especially those in the South in America, because I know you're from this world. Not that you inhabit it, but you're from it. Where they have this image that they really lay out the story of salvation, from the fall in Eden and the Ten Commandments, the Second Temple, the coming of Christ, blah blah blah, and it presents it in such a way as to suggest that, first of all, that God evolved his thought, that somehow, he tried Eden, that didn't work out, so now we'll try something else, and now I'll try something else, and now I'll try something else, which of course suggests that God is not omniscient at all.
Not consistent.
And it's just the massive flaw is that they're anthropomorphizing God, because they're looking at how it's been revealed to man over time, and conceptualizing that in a linear manner, and then putting that back on God instead of, and I said, look, just a little thing here. This was always God's plan. This isn't plan A went wrong, plan B went wrong, plan C. This is because God is eternal and all time is present to him. And so God doesn't make a mistake. And when you say, we're tapping into, the reason we can tap into it is because all of it is present at once in what Christians would come to call the divine logos, the word, that it's eternal. And so I think that's where the conceptualization goes wrong, and where a lot of Christians get really worried about esoteric things is they have this sort of almost formulaic view of a linear revelation of God's salvation for mankind. And that's actually not true. It's theologically not true.
It's not. Yeah, it's the plan has always. That's the whole point of Oh Happy Fault, is that even from the very beginning, it was already designed to work out perfectly, even in spite of ourselves. And that's something that's hard for, I think, humans to wrap their mind around, because they're always so linear, and they keep falling back on that linear thinking. So when it comes to something like hell, that too is a bit linear, because it implies that you're born, you have you either live a good life and follow God's will, or you don't, and then you go to heaven or hell, and heaven's forever with God, or in hell is forever suffering because you're being tortured by the devils there. That is not Sheol. Sheol, no Jew would have recognized anything of that. We get some of that imagery from the fires of Gehenna, which people forget was a trash dump where you went to destroy trash. So the metaphor that Jesus is using here, the allegory that Jesus is using, is that you will be thrown out. In other words, there can be no place in the final correction, which is what we call in the book of Revelation, Christian theology, the new heaven and the new earth. It will be perfect. So therefore, nothing imperfect can exist, because anything imperfect will be wiped out. So by virtue of believing that there's this place of permanent torture, that would imply that there's going to be this little pocket of the universe somewhere, a little pocket of God's creation where things will still forever be imperfect, which completely is against the theology. And that is why we get into things like the first death and the second death, because it is truly death. It isn't torture. The torture is recognizing what you could have had and knowing that there's nothing you can do to get it. And then losing yourself in that, which is why I am an annihilationist. And I know that that's not necessarily conventional Catholic theology, but I can't reconcile what's in Scripture with the medievalism that people take for granted today. I can't, because the Scripture is very clear as to that when we're talking about hell, and when the Bible is translated in English as hell, we're talking about Sheol and Hades. We're not talking about the medieval Dante's Inferno hell, which is a complete fabrication. So where do people go, okay, if they don't go directly to heaven? Again, we're talking linear. This is a linear question, which is why it's a very difficult question to answer, because you can't, there is no linear response, okay? And this is what I mean by this, okay? We know that we can't enter into the perfection of God until the resurrection of the dead, which happens at the end of time. But as soon as you step outside of time, then it's already happened, and always has happened, and always will happen. So at that point,
and that's why Christ can say the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
It can be right, because it's right now.
Everything he teaches about is about the kingdom. How many things begin with the kingdom of heaven?
Is at hand, because it's right now. And
also the other thing that's amazing, and again, where I'm sorry to pick on Protestants, where Protestant theology falls down. By the way, annihilationism is far closer to what the Orthodox teach, right?
It is.
But where Protestants fall down,
they didn't have Dante, Father.
Well, yeah, that's right. Most of our images of hell are from Dante.
It is
written 1,000 years later. But what a lot of Protestants miss out, because they focus so much on the cross, right? That's not a bad thing, the atonement of sins and all of that. But they forget about the empty tomb, because the other thing you're describing in terms of, because you're right, you can't answer. A linear question is a wrong question, although I'm not saying the person's wrong for asking it. But the amazing thing about the empty tomb, or about the ascension, is that what we do know about heaven is that there is a human there, because Jesus is there, and he's still man.
He's still man.
And so that's why the stress on the incarnation is so important to Christians, because we're saying, no, this eternal Logos is embodied as a man, and that man is in heaven. And therefore, men can be in heaven. Sorry, humans.
No, you're right. Because it will be both a corporeal and incorporeal reality. Yeah. Just in very much the same way that this one is, only this is a fabrication of it. This is a copy of it, an imperfect, a terribly imperfect version of it. Whereas there it won't be, that the incorporeality that we deal with, which is, the mind that gets us into so much trouble, will be fully in control and not subject to the weaknesses that we currently face in our current situation. But I'm going to blow everyone's mind. So to answer the question about where are they then, if they're not reincarnated, where do they go until, what is Sheol? Okay. I'm going to blow your mind. All right. This is, again, esoteric Christianity. It's not going to be something that you're going to find necessarily in conventional theological discussions. However, I don't think there's any monk that's ever told me that I was wrong. Okay. At least the monks, the monks get it. This is the truth. Okay. Sheol does not exist really in time. It's outside of time too. Okay. Because it's closer, believe it or not, Sheol is closer to authentic reality than this will ever be. This fabricated fallen cosmos that we think is real. Okay. So the harrowing of hell, when Jesus went into hell, Sheol, not Lucifer's little prison, but Sheol, when Christ went down there, conventional theology teaches during the three, that between the death on the cross and the resurrection, okay, he went to the harrowing of hell, they call it. He went to Sheol to liberate the righteous there, okay? Now, we've always just assumed theologically what that means is, of course, the Old Testament prophets, Abraham and Moses probably, right? Even Adam and Eve are basically, redeemed, okay? You are also being harrowed from hell, because if you enter into Sheol, and we all will, once you're outside of time, you've always been there and you always will be until God changes it. So in the perspective of timelessness, not a linear answer, okay, you're already in Sheol and being harrowed from it, from Jesus, right between the the crucifixion and the resurrection. You're part of that. That is the moment right before the resurrection of the dead. He takes you out of Sheol, and he did it between the crucifixion and the resurrection. And even though you don't think of yourself as being there yet, if you get there, and we all get there because we're all going to end up in Sheol first. That is the first moment. And Buddhists call this the bardo. It's the same reality, okay? You will always have been there because you're outside of time at this point. So that's why I say to you, if you are saved, and we know, I would never presume to say that I am saved, but if I am saved, I'm already in heaven. Because once I enter into the timeless reality, if I get there at all, I've always been there, and I've never not been there. So I was actually teaching Levi because a lot of you know, if you follow the Mass, that Levi's being confirmed at this year's Easter Vigil. I'm going to confirm him. So I'm catechizing him with the final, now he's old enough to really kind of comprehend some of these higher Catholic theological points. We're catechizing him through Lent so that he's ready for confirmation on the Vigil, okay? And a little discussion got in about this, and I tried to explain, you know, that because one of the things that people complain or criticize is that what kind of good God would have allowed us to fall in the first place. Well, I was trying to explain, oh, happy fault, which is the idea that if Adam and Eve hadn't committed original sin, we would have never needed Jesus because we would have never been imperfect, but yet then we would have never had the knowledge of what it is to be without God and needing him to bring us back. So the question that I got once from an atheist was, why didn't God just stop them? Why didn't he just, you know, wouldn't a real benevolent God would have come down and say, wait a second, no, you don't want to do this. Let me explain why. Let me show you why. Let me give you the wisdom so that you make the right choice. And I told that atheist, I said, how do you know that's not what he did? He said, well, he didn't because we fell by your theology. I said, how do you know that falling isn't exactly God showing us what happens when we make the mistake? And that in the moment of Judgment Day, how do you know that Judgment Day isn't being able to finally make the choice? Do you still want to fall? Or do you want to enter into salvation? When you get the linear crap out of theology, then it all makes perfect sense. The problem that atheists have is they can't get past the linear thinking. But you can't deal with God in a linear way. You're dealing with timelessness when it comes to God. So if you're looking at your life and you're like, why is it so fucked up here? What kind of reality is this? Why does evil exist? All these questions. You need to remind yourself that this is God showing you why you should not fall. And then Judgment Day is deciding whether or not you still want to. That's it. That's
Jamie shared something this week that speaks to this.
Oh, really? Okay.
On Facebook. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember, Jamie, but you put up a picture that says, and I love this, when God puts a calling on your life, he already factored in your stupidity. Yes. Most comforting thing I've ever heard. and you know, happy fault, right?
Got to factor that stupidity in because we're we're just the lapes.
So in other words, the answer to the question, why didn't he stop them, is it earlier on in Genesis, he made them in his own image, in his own image and likeness, he made them, you know, and so, and that included with creative freedom.
And that's the fundamental point, I think, is that we are currently coming into the awareness of what that actually means and the implications of that, which are profound implications. And I think, again, this kindergarten theology that has like so entirely taken over Christianity today. This idea of going on to heaven to, live in some ridiculous fantasy land paradise like Disney or something. The reality of it is that no, heaven is coming into full realization of all of the profound responsibility that we now have, and that in that freedom that we were created with. So, so that's that. I mean, I don't know. I know it's kind of difficult. To express in to answer this question in a way that I think makes conventional sense. But you just have to trust me on this one. It's a little bit like trying to write a Back to the Future or Star Trek episode when you're trying, because if you're doing a time travel, okay, you got to take into consideration that, all these possibilities are existing at the same time. It's like Doctor Who, right? He might be on his 15th or whatever regeneration, but, as long as all of his previous ones have been traveling through time, they're still out there somewhere, right? Because you're outside of the linear thing. And this is what God is like. That's what omnipresence is. What does it mean to be everywhere? Well, that's what it means, is that you're not bound by any space and any time. It is all one reality and the now. And that's, Father, you said it best when you said, the kingdom of God is at hand. That's what it means. It's now. It's not something that's coming. It's not something that is, all the way back then. It's now, right now, and always been now. It's always been. It's just the revelation's different. And if you look at scripture, that's exactly what's going on. God's slowly, the scripture is, I think even that was wrong for me to say. We tend to look at it as God slowly revealing to us, but what it really is us slowly waking up to the revelation, to the truth. And as we go on from Genesis to Revelation, that's the entire human story.
It's so difficult to go against that, because I know exactly where you just got caught in that thing. We do it. It's so instinctive to us because, and again, this is also in Genesis has so much in it. People just read Genesis as, let's look at how God scientifically created the world. They're missing every single point in Genesis. One of the key things about the book Genesis is that it's Adam and Eve that hide from God, not God that hides from Adam and Eve. But when we now look towards God, we think that we've got to find Him. Right?
Yes,
and
yeah.
so that's wrong. Even though it's a natural way of thinking because of that initial response to having wrong divine love.
Yes,
it is a wrong conception. That you're right. The conception is that no, God has revealed everything, always, everywhere, all the time.
all the time.
And we're we are our mission is to allow ourselves to receive that revelation. That's it, and that's why if people want to inhabit the kingdom of heaven, then be the light, be the salt, be the yeast, all those be fruitful on the vine. All those images that Jesus teaches us. Every time we participate in that, we're participating in the kingdom of heaven. We're actually instantiating the kingdom of heaven where we are.
Exactly.
And we all experience that. We know when someone loves us. We know when someone forgives us. We know when someone visits us, clothes us, feeds us. Even on a really, really basic level, we experience something of the kingdom of heaven.
Absolutely.
And I think if we conceptualize our lives like that, when we receive a guest in our homes, we're participating in the kingdom of heaven. It puts such a different emphasis on meaning and our purpose in life. And we play ourselves down too much. When we do those humble, simple things, we're taking our right place in the divine story. Like it's amazing. That's why it's the mustard seed. It's the really small things. That's where we participate fully in the kingdom of heaven.
No,
it's much harder for us to do it on a macro level. Only God can do that.
Only God. Yeah. Well said. I mean, perfectly said, honestly. All Okay, let's get to our last question here before the break, and we'll get to tonight's topic with Darren. It's going to be awesome.
So the final question, have you heard of children being under a certain age that are unable to be possessed? Something about the age of reasoning or something along those lines?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've heard of people that make this claim. It's not true, of course. The age of reason is a Protestant fabrication. There's no such thing. The devil, as we understand, the authentic version, or even the fictitious one that a lot of Christians believe in, does not care about a person's age, only their vulnerability, only their availability, because there's an opportunistic aspect to evil. And we all have the fallen nature. We all have Yetzer Hara. Yep. So it doesn't matter if you're 1 day old or 100 years old, you are still subject to the same risks that come with the fallen state. And so, no, that's why we baptize babies, infants, because they are still eligible to receive the grace of salvation.
Yeah, they're the easiest targets.
Well, it's not just to protect them. Actually, baptizing someone just to protect them from evil is actually probably the worst reason to baptize someone. And I know that we get a lot of people that ask us.
It's the lowest resolution.
The lowest, right? Yeah, it really is.
No reason.
I mean,
it gets them on the path.
It gets it, yeah. But it's not a talisman. Baptism is not a talisman to be utilized as a protective device. What it does, though, is it does provide essential graces that are needed for salvation. And the reason the church does this with infants is because that needs to start right away because of the fallen state. All right. So typically, as soon as that newborn is strong enough to be able to make his trek to the church and get this done, it should be planned and done, not waited. And the worst thing, the opposite side of the people who come to us because they want to protect their kids, and that's the only thing they're concerned about. Who cares about believing in Jesus, right? Yeah. The other side of the coin are these people that will be like, well, I don't want to decide for my child what religion to practice. They'll wait till they're old enough and they can decide for themselves. And Protestants actually have a kind of version of this, I'm sorry, baptism is not bar mitzvah, okay? It's not a coming of age party. It is an essential quality of salvation. It is essential to that process. Scripture makes this extremely clear. And we have non-canonical sources that are absolutely almost were canonical, like the Didache, okay, that make it very clear that infant baptism was an early Christian practice. So they knew this back then, and the church has carried it on, and that's why Orthodoxy and Christianity, the oldest two denominations, if you want to call them denominations, I would actually argue they're not denominations, they're just basically the church in its original state. Yeah. They both baptized infants. It's only much, much later where they're like, oh no, you gotta have the age of reason, you gotta know what you're receiving. Well, what are godparents for?
Worse than that, believers' baptism. Yeah. That suggests that you can be saved by your own intellect.
And that's a works, isn't it? That's works. So no.
It's pride.
It is pride. It is. So no, there is absolutely no, there's absolutely no justification for that. I have seen children younger than 5 suffer from demonic possession. It absolutely can happen, and vulnerability is all it takes.
And it's not a sign of curse. It's not a sign of sin.
No. It can be an adult, but
Padre Pio was possessed.
Well, look at the Desert Fathers too. I mean, they all dealt with possessions. Absolutely. Yeah. There's different reasons for it. Now, in today's day and age, spiritual apathy is the primary reason it happens, but that's not going to be a child's issue. It's going to be more about opportunity and vulnerability and that type of thing. So I don't know, Brandon, does that answer it to your satisfaction?
Yeah, pretty much it does, because I've heard about that with the age of reasoning growing up Southern Baptist, and so I kind of wondered, is that actually a thing, or is that a more relatively newer idea?
Yeah, no, it's not. it's not valid. It's not valid. And, I mean, even animals can become possessed. Anything that's part of the fallen world is at risk for this. Possession, understand, again, possession, we have this very, very linear kindergarten theology kind of understanding of it. Like there's like these little demons that are hiding and they're going to, they pounce you. And then if you just, they're going to latch on and enter into you and try to steal your soul. That's not really what possession is. Possession is an over accentuation of the darkness that's already within. Okay. It's just that the vehicle of suppression, which is grace, is not abundant enough to compensate for that darkness. And that's why cultivation of grace, even though you can't merit grace, and I think I need to make that clear, because when I talk about the cultivation of grace a lot, that does not imply that I mean you're meriting it. You can't merit grace. Grace is a pure gift. But cultivation is the relationship with God. And that's the only way to get the grace. It's the
parable of the sower. It's the parable of the
There you
It's
go.
absolutely solid.
Yes.
You can cultivate yourself to be the good soil.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. The seed comes from God. The grace comes from God.
The grace comes from God. Yes.
And in fact, it's showered down everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's available everywhere. You're the one that has to change yourself to be the fertile ground.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. So I think that's the way to that we need to look at it. So much of what it is, so much of the problems with Christianity from inside and out, from the atheists looking at it from the outside to the Christians who think they get it right on the inside and they have it so wrong. It's really just that Christianity is so old. We're so far removed from its origins that people now believe what people say about it instead of what it says. And that's a bad habit that everyone, Christian or atheist, have fallen into. And no one's doing the work to bring themselves back to a more complete, comprehensive understanding of what it really is saying. And when you're afraid of things like understanding the esoteric model, well, then you're cutting yourself off from so much of it, okay? Because so much of what's in Scripture is actually esoteric. It was designed to be. It was meant to be. There's a lot of stuff you can take for face value, but there's a lot of stuff you can't. And when it comes to Jesus, there's really not much of it that he said at face value. One of the only things he said at face value was probably the most esoteric thing he actually said, was the entire theology of the Eucharist. Because he was actually being quite literal and matter of fact about, we actually consume him. Yes, we actually eat Jesus. Yes, that's exactly what he's telling us to do, and that's exactly what we do at Mass. And it sounds shocking, but again, from a linear perspective, that would be shocking, wouldn't it?
It's even more shocking in the original Greek, because the word is not eat,
no,
actually.
It's
the word
no.
is gnaw,
Yeah.
chew. It's what animals do. It is like...
Yeah.
It's not a surprise that it goes on to say many people left him that day. This teaching was too hard.
Yeah. Well, think about it from a Jew. You're talking about drinking blood. That was like from the time that they were born, they were taught that this is the most unclean thing you could ever do. You would even our notions of vampires, the whole idea of the archetype of the vampire drinking your blood actually comes from this Jewish taboo against the blood consumption, which is why, they kosher meats to draw all the blood out of it. And it's related, of course, to sacrifice. It's related to the spilling of the life force and all of the spiritual implications there.
Well, and the animalistic eating is also a direct connection to the scapegoat.
Yes.
The scapegoat that Yom Kippur was set out,
yes.
To be ravaged by the lions in the wilderness. It's basically saying you're going to be, I am the scapegoat, and you're the lions feasting on me.
Yes.
It's like, it's a perfect metaphor.
It is a perfect metaphor. It is. Well said. Well said. So to get back to the question, we have to, and I'm noticing that even in the chat here, there's been some discussion that I think I don't want to assume, but I think we're going in a bit of a misunderstanding here. Padre Pio, you mentioned, and suffered from demonic possession. and then Laura came on and mentioned that he was a very pious person. The two are not mutually exclusive, okay? You can absolutely be pious and possessed. Just because you're possessed does not mean you're a horrible person. Right. There are many saints that suffered this in various forms. Teresa of Avila had numerous demonic attachments. Most of her writings talk about this. Yeah, Bosco, and then read the Philokalia. I mean, it's all about this. Yeah. I mean, it really is. So actually, the more pious you are,
table at the moment. I think that's a tragic admission, isn't it? The Philokalia. It's my bedtime reading.
It is wonderful bedtime reading, though, because it really does set your mind right for the rest of the night. But
and
no,
Callistos Ware's translation is the best.
Yes,
just to give it a plug.
So there's two things that you can do. Okay, there's two things you can do. I mean, that demonic possession is indicative of. It can be brought on by an overindulgence in one's darkness. Can also be brought on by overly being very successful at overcoming it. Because see, the Yetzer Hara will always overreact to anything that takes away from its status quo. So if you become very apathetic spiritually and just don't care about God or God's will or anything and become a very sinful person, well, then you're just feeding the Yetzer Hara. So that gets strong for that. But if you're fighting it constantly, it doesn't like that either. That can make it lash out like an animal in a corner. So either reaction could provoke a demonic response. Piety does not eliminate, does not preclude the risks. Okay, in fact, it can increase it. I'd say, one of the most profound things I was ever told as a seminarian by one of my spiritual directors was that the closer you get to God, the closer Satan gets to you. And it's absolutely the truth. It's absolutely the truth, which is why another priest told me once that God only chooses the worst of us to become priests. There's a reason for that. We are obligated to.
Broken men make the best priests. That's another way of putting it.
And you know why? Because we have to understand the darkness intimately. To fight it.
And that's Jungian. That's exactly what Jung was talking about.
That's right.
Exactly that. Because one of the ways to get possessed is to ignore your badness, to pretend, I wouldn't harm anybody. Yeah. No, you need to know that you can be possessed by these demonic, thoughts, tendencies, and to confront that and to transform it into something which gives you energy to do the right thing. So the pious people can be possessed like Padre Pio, but look at the fruits of their possession.
And that's the difference.
Of their possession.
That's the difference.
Are people gathered into the kingdom? Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, look at even Ghost Adventures, right? How many people have told me that they saw us on Ghost Adventures, and it brought them back to the church? I've been told that so many times.
Brilliant.
So I mean, they
don't even get to see a lot of the good stuff.
I know they don't, but it still inspires them. It still inspires them, and it's like, my God, this is real. And I witnessed it. There's something about that really changed, in me, because I witnessed this, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. But speaking of the devil, we're about to talk more about the darkness with Ouija boards and Zozo with Darren Evens when we get back here in just a few moments. Don't go anywhere. We got a great show ahead.
into a lonely void and I can't get out. Hope for something magical, cause no one else seems to even bother. Looks like I'm on my own, facing this loneliness. It is hard to be found when no one's looking. I'm feeling left out and I keep screaming. No one ever understands it. Feels like I became Atlantis, hidden from the world. I'm looking for a way.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. We are now about to bring on our special returning guest, Darren Evens, to talk about the Ouija board, the dangers of the Ouija board, his own personal experiences, and to get an update. He hasn't been on the show in a few seasons, so there should be a lot to talk about here, as well as updates on Zozo. It's always a fascinating time when Darren's on the show, and you got a lot to look forward to, because this is going to be a good segment. Don't go anywhere. Okay, so we're going to keep the lines closed for the moment, and I will open them at the break for the third hour, and that's when you guys can call into the show and ask any questions you might have directly by calling in. We'll also get to questions that are coming in from the chat on all of the various platforms across the internet. Our moderators are working hard to catch them all, and I'll try to get to each and every one of them. But our guest tonight is, he does not need an introduction. You all know who he is. He's been on Ghost Adventures on the same episode with us once on Ghost Adventures Live. He is the leading authority on all things Zozo. So let's not waste any more time and welcome Darren Evens back to the show. How you doing tonight, Darren?
Whoop.
I can't hear you. Oh, wait, hang on. No,
Uh-oh.
we got Go ahead and talk again. Darren, I can't hear you. Father Chris, can you?
No, I think your mic's not connected.
Yeah, I think, Darren, your mic's not connected. I'm not getting any sound from you.
If you just go to settings on Zoom, you should be able to
go into the setting. It might be a different. Sometimes Zoom will automatically default to something that is not your microphone. It does it to me all the time when I connect my VR headset.
Yes.
It will say that, oh, you're using this microphone, even though it's not even connected. All right, so let's go try that again. I'll unmute you.
All right. Hey there.
Nope, no sound yet.
No.
I sent him a message.
All right, so let's try this. Keep your camera on, Darren, and go ahead and call into the show. Do you have the call-in information? Let's just go ahead and give that to you.
Yeah. More than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, let's try this. If you could call into the show at 718-362-6380. 718-362-6380, and the PIN number is 855-4111. Well, while we wait for this to work out, I don't know what it is. It's sometimes what happens with Zoom is that it just will default to some microphone you don't even have, and if your computer doesn't like it, it won't work. I have that problem almost all the time, and sometimes it's even happened to me when I was about to go on the air. Let's go ahead and try this again. Okay, Darren.
Are you there?
Nope, no sound. Go ahead and text him. Do you have the phone number?
718.
Yep.
362.
That'll be the easiest way. Just keep your
6380.
Yeah, 6380. Yeah. Go ahead and keep your camera on so we can at least see you. But
855-4111.
What was the weird thing is that when we were getting voice feedback from him before we started the show, it went away after we went live. So I don't know what it is. Welcome to technology, folks.
It's subject matter and Zoom. That's happened to me before on Zoom.
Has it?
Yeah.
All right. So
Darren, if you can hear me, I sent you a text with the number and PIN number on a Facebook Messenger.
Yeah. When you call in, I'll go ahead and bring you on. So we do the backup. It works. Not a problem.
Okay, he's just seen my message. Hopefully, he'll be calling here shortly.
Okay.
Bless his heart.
Poor guy.
He's been chopping at the bit, and then the daggum audio doesn't work.
It's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we should just probably
I'll
do
just
sound
shut my
checks
mug in the meantime.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
We should probably do sound tests and a half hour in advance in the future. It's tough because sometimes guests come on for the second hour, though.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like he's calling here. At least I see him holding the phone, but I'm not getting him in the queue yet.
He's texting me.
Okay.
Number said not included in rate plan. What the heck does that mean?
Okay, let me do this. Let me go ahead and do this. I'm going to go to a short break here again, and we're going to call him directly and bring him on.
Sorry, guys. Stand by because he's got an update on the Zozo Demon House.
We'll be right back. Okay, I think we've got him back here. So, Darren, can you hear us now? Go ahead and put that down. All right, let's try this again. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay. Mute that one because we're going to get feedback. All right. I think we've got this fixed. Wait, I'm getting feedback on myself now.
Are you getting a lot of feedback from me?
Let me see this.
I've got it on now.
Okay, I think we're good now. No, we're not getting feedback on you. It's because the only way we could connect you to the switchboard was to have Jamie call you on her phone and her to merge the calls by her calling the switchboard. So I think we're okay now. Anyway, Darren, welcome to the show.
Weird. I've had Zoom meetings before and they could hear me.
That is so strange. I don't know. I mean, I was getting audio feedback from you. Right. That was normal before we went live. And when we brought you back on, or when we were ready to bring you on, it was dead. No sound. So I don't know what's going on.
Sure. You know, this happens sometimes. Well, almost every time I do an interview, I have some kind of weird audio problems, or it's not uncommon. I'm sure you guys have experienced it before. But hey, nice to see you guys. I've been listening to you for the past hour. And, wow, you guys have really changed things up. I love the background. Good to see you guys again. It's been a few years.
Yes, it has.
It has.
Glad to hear.
You unmuted it.
You unmuted it.
So we're going to have feedback. Okay. Why don't you go put that down there somewhere right now? All right. Throw it out into the woods. But we should be okay now. I'm sorry, Darren. But no, it's been so long since we've had you on and had a conversation. It's great to have you with us. And we're so interested to hear what's been happening with your research, because you're always working on something, aren't you?
Always. Amongst running a business, since I've moved out of Vegas, I've, been back to Tulsa, now my hometown, for about 3.5 years since we were all hooking up in Vegas, and I'm glad to be back in Tulsa. Things are a lot more laid back, and I have a business here, and I'm super happy. I think the last time we did Vestiges, Danae had just had Zachary, and he's 4 years old now, and his hair's longer than mine.
Oh, really?
And he's quite an amazing character. Growing up, and I'm super happy. I do a lot of artwork. I'm sitting here next to a piece that I just finished. Actually, I can show you. It's a super huge, multifaceted waterfall.
He's got some skills with the paint, Bishop.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, and so there's a super surprise down at the bottom. I call it Fantasy Falls. But if you get to looking in my artwork, you'll find a lot of hidden esoteric type of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
And the funny thing about that is I've been doing a weird type of artwork now for about 8 years, involving kind of a Bob Ross technique of wet on wet techniques. But here's the thing. For the last couple of years, I've been working on what I call spirit art. And it involves taking a piece of plastic and dipping it into various colors of aerosols that are laid down, and let gravity do its thing. And you mash it all up, these different plastics, and you lay it on the wet aerosols. And when you do, shit shows up.
Really? I've never. Did you come up with this, or is this something that you were exposed to somewhere?
When I was younger, I was quite the artist. I won a lot of contests as a teenager in high school, and I had a pretty cool portfolio put together that was stolen. And it had a lot of my award-winning artworks in that as a young man, and it pissed me off to the point where I didn't paint for 20 years. And so when I picked painting back up, I was actually watching Bob Ross, and then I was like, you know what? I love Bob Ross. Who doesn't love him?
I think we all grew up watching Bob Ross.
Absolutely. And so
relaxing.
Me too. and I was watching Bob Ross, and then I happened to see a guy that was using spray paint as art, and it's kind of an old Mexican technique. But anyway, to make a long story short, I started learning about that technique, and it got me back into art. And it's an incredible technique. But getting back to the spirit art, which I call it, what I found is when I was, I used to do videos of me doing this, and you drip these plastics and these. I've used old socks. I've used different textures, but when you dip them into this wet paint, and you kind of mentally aware of when you're doing it, is you're asking the universe to produce art with you, and it's an incredible technique. Many times I've dipped my different substances into my. I use poster board a lot because it retards water. It's good for spray paint.
Yeah,
right.
But it's kind of this weird technique that, whether it's pareidolia or whatever it manifests, things show up of their own volition, of their own manifest. And so then I look at that, and then I let my brain calculate, well, where is that going to go? So it basically paints itself, if you can imagine that. It's quite a concept. One I hope to keep developing. But guys, it's great to see you.
Absolutely.
In addition to my art, I play a lot of music. I'm a guitar obsessive nut, and so I'm into a lot of things as far as a creative type guy, along with my research into several books that I'm writing now. 2 of which are still in a research phase. And you guys know me; I'm quite the research hound when I want to be.
Oh, right. You absolutely are. Yes.
And when I dig, I find stuff, and that can be a dangerous thing, Brian. As you know, we've talked about this.
Oh yes. There's always risk involved in the work that that we all do, I guess, in this paranormal
and a lot of
field.
things, but by association, because I am who I am,
mm-hmm.
I have to kind of bounce back and forth between this family guy who I am, and then I got to get into this whole Zozo thing, and what I'm known for is this Zozo phenomenon, and trying to make sense of it as it pertains to spirit communication and demonology. And it crosses a lot of borders, as you know. And currently I'm under contract from a new TV show that wants to talk about some of my experiences that I can't really discuss of who the show is. It's not Ghost Adventures. But I'm also been interviewed in a new book that I can talk a little bit about with involving Richard Estep in a new book called In Search of Demons.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Which is going to be coming out soon. And I've gone back and forth with Rich for several months, and he's also interviewed some very notable people in the paranormal in regards to this. And I always loved the old paranormal show In Search Of.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys used to watch In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy, and it was way before
we cut
any
our teeth on that.
Yeah.
When I was a young man, I had this Steve Austin toy, and I was a Bigfoot enthusiast, even as a 5-year-old. So I've been involved in this stuff for quite a while, guys. But I something caught my eye with is it Chris Yates? Is he from down under?
Yeah, he's
I'm from England, but I live in Australia. Yeah.
Chris, I can't help but notice your accent. It brought me back to, I wanted to ask you something right as we get off the bat here. I was a friend of Father Barry Mays, the famous chaplain exorcist from Australia before he passed. Are you familiar with Father Barry Mays?
I never met him, but I've heard of him. Yeah.
Well, I was just curious because him being from Australia, we worked on a few Zozo cases together, and I saw that you are from Australia, and so this guy was amazing. He was the John Zappis of Australia for quite a while, and he was one of the more famous exorcists from Australia. Look him up because he's an amazing guy, and he worked a lot of cases involving Ouija boards, and I guess that gets us back, Brian, to what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah,
is the dangers of the Ouija board, possibly.
Yeah, well, let's. I mean, I guess that's where we should begin. We'll talk a little bit about Zozo here in a minute, but let's talk about the Ouija board. I remember when we were all in Vegas with Patty Negri. She had that board there, and we were at that bar.
Yeah, there's a couple of good pictures of us.
Yeah, and we were getting some Zozo, I guess, feedback from the board that night.
Right.
But it freaks people out. It freaks people out when they see people using it. It freaks people out when they hear about it. There's a lot of misconceptions about it, of course. But and I have my own theories on it and contentions that I employ in the work when it comes to Ouija boards. However, that is not to suggest in any way that because I might have certain more mundane explanations for some of the phenomena does not mean that it's not dangerous. There's definitely risk and danger involved anytime you start playing around with these types of forces. So I guess let's start off, Darren. What is your perspective on it, how it works? What are people communicating with when they use the Ouija board? Are they spirits? Are they the subconscious? Is there some kind of other esoteric thing going on? Are we always dealing with demons? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, Brian, you're a great interviewer. We could talk all night on that exact thing. What is it we're dealing with? The Civil War. There were so many people dying back then in the 1800s, and it caused a spirit revolution, so to speak. The spirit movement in the 1800s, various devices were being employed to speak to the dead. There was a need to speak to our loved ones that passed away. That's always been one of the major driving forces in using Ouija boards, regardless of whether it be in the form of a talking board or prior to the Ouija board, you had the spirit dials and you had other means to spell out the alphabet. And so the modern invention of the Ouija board in 1891, we begin the patent process of Charles Kennard and all that. And I'm not really an expert in the history of the board. I do know a little bit about the history, of course, and have been asked to speak at WouijaCon, various television shows, in regards to my experiences involving this Zozo thing. And so I kind of put the Ouija board back on the map, because when I came out with my research in 2008, it was kind of under the radar, and then there was a lot of controversy and became a viral sensation. And never in my wildest dreams would I have suspected that my early experiences with this Zozo character on spirit boards throughout the years, I never would have dreamed that it developed into this viral sensation that happened in 2008, 2009, when I went public with my research, and I discovered that other people all over the world were having communication with this Zozo thing. It caused a whole hornet's nest of controversy, and it remains to this day what it is that that we're communicating with, not only in the Zozo phenomena, but if we step outside the Zozo phenomena and look at spirit communication as a whole, or in separate forms, how the Ouija board can be one of the most common ways to communicate with the dead, Brian.
Yeah. I mean,
that can be a dangerous thing.
Absolutely. What do you think the primary danger is? Is it that you don't know what's coming through? Or is it that there are other things that can come through and pretend to be a relative, for example? Or, my experience with the Ouija board has been interesting. I've talked about many of my experiences before. We might have even talked about them, you and I, Darren. But I will say, when it comes to
The
factual
TV experience we have talked about your experiences.
Yeah, and I mean, my experience have affected the physical world. It's remarkable what I have been able to encounter with this thing. But do you find that the risk factor is in that? Because one of the things I've noticed is that the information can sometimes be dead on accurate, and a lot of times it is a complete misdirection, and all of these prophecies and things that it can tell you never actually seem to mean anything or amount to anything. So do you think the danger is in the deception, or is there something more sinister at work?
Brian, it's a double-edged sword. Regardless of which camp site you're at, which side of the fence you reside on, whether it be that involves internal agencies that we're speaking with when we put our hands on the planchet, and it starts to begin to communicate with us in different forms and different ways that we're not used to. There's many different interesting aspects of what can happen. And when we analyze the communication aspect itself, I was perhaps one of the first to interview researchers at USBC that were communicating with the Ouija board in an attempt to communicate with the subconscious. This was the first time that scientists actually used crowdfunding efforts to facilitate the funding necessary to conduct these scientific experiments involving a Ouija board. And what we found, or what they had found, interesting beyond anything else in their experiments, were the fact that there was a significant statistical difference in the truthfulness of how they answered their questions. There was a significant degree of more accuracy when they were on the board as opposed to when they were asked the same questions off the board. And so while they did not attribute these significant unexplained events, while they didn't attribute the paranormal being scientifically trained, they didn't eliminate that possibility. And so that was a fascinating interview.
Sure.
When we start analyzing what really happens. And so when I was invited to WouijaCon back in 2018, I believe, they conducted experiments from a Dutch scientist that were using eye tracking movements to try to facilitate some type of explanation as to what happens when we're talking with these unseen agencies, Brian.
Yeah.
And so it's always been a fascination of mine. Whether we sit outside the fence, well, all you're talking to is obviously archetypal, energies within oneself subconscious. But, regardless of whether you think that way or we think we're talking to spirits that exist outside of our subconscious, it doesn't change the paranormality of the communication exchange.
Right.
And the weird things that happen. And so since 2020, and we haven't talked about this, I rarely do interviews anymore. Since the whole pandemic and all that thing has happened, there's been a big degree of shutdown when it comes to the Zozo phenomena, which, thank God, this was getting crazy, guys. And when I look at the research that me and Rosemary were doing back in 2018, when we were responding to emails concerning China, people were being sent predictions that Donald Trump would become president before he was even elected.
Yeah.
And it was predicting a war with China, and and then it didn't happen at the time they said. And Brian, you had asked, well, how does it mix the truth with falsity? And if we look at the Gulf breeze, what happened with the military members that actually were in Germany, and they began Ouija sessions. And these were people that were trained in mind control. These were high level security, high level military people. that conducted secret sessions with Ouija boards that caused them to go AWOL and to go to Florida back in the 90s, because during these sessions it was predicted these certain earthquakes would happen, and these things would come true. But many of the predictions did not, Brian.
Yeah.
But it still caught the interest of these governments. And it's the only time in history. It's one of the strangest Ouija incidents that's ever happened as far as document, and many facets of the Gulf Breeze 6 still remains classified.
Yeah.
And so there's more to this Ouija thing than just being an average parlor game, which is what he's kind of been. If you're a proponent of the board, it's just simply a parlor device. It contains no, it's not abhorrently evil or inherently evil. And so that's debatable within itself, because can objects be haunted? And if so, can it be a haunted candlestick, or a haunted Ouija? Can these, is it like, the early Viz animism, in which it was believed by these early practitioners of pagan type beliefs that spirits dwelled not only in objects and humans, but also places, trees, and so there's a diverse belief system. And I think that the most interesting thing, we might go pretty fast tonight, is the diversity of this Zozo phenomenon and the many different interpretations of it in the many languages, how this word is able to jump geographical and language barriers and always being an evil term, Brian.
Well, I remember last time you were on this show a few years ago, you talked about how your research found that Zozo went way back into ancient history.
Babylon, right? Did you find something in...
the sad thing about today's, I don't know what it is. I feel reluctant to release my research nowadays, because it's been so misconstrued. When I used to publish a lot of things on my blog site, mm-hmm. And people would just list it off and interpret it in their own way. And I was rarely given credit for a lot of my early research on the Zozo phenomenon. And it was very discouraging.
I remember. Yeah.
I was called a liar, that I fabricated all this, and you have to deal with that aspect whenever you're in this field. And it took me, I'm not a very thick-skinned person. I take this shit seriously. I'm not in the paranormal for money or fame. But unfortunately, because of so many people and this becoming a viral thing, and it was the first time on Twitter or social media that a demonic name had ever trended. Whenever we originally did the Ghost Adventures episode of the Zozo Demon House,
Yeah.
And that was the first, and that bothered Zach back then, and we were on the show Aftershocks, and we were talking about, he kind of put me on the spot. He said, Darren, is it smart to be doing a Ouija board at a location or whatever? No, it's not.
Anyway.
Not.
That's not going to stop them.
Research.
Let's establish that. It's not very smart. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
I have used Ouija boards.
Are true at once. Is it not just as possible that both things can be true about a Ouija board? It can be both those things. Whether it's the kind of the view that it's a psycho Jungian kind of thing, that can be true. Well, I think that's true regardless, right? Because anytime we enter into archetypal thinking, we end up in that place. And it can also be simultaneously a tool for darker forces or for other spirits as well. And maybe a better image of a Ouija board, I don't think it's the case that people are saying, oh, well, they're possessed in themselves. It's more like looking at it like a firearm, right? Like a firearm's not good or evil; it's what's done with it.
It's a tool.
So a chainsaw is
then used.
Still a tool.
You can use a chainsaw to cut wood,
right,
to save your family, or you can use that for other nefarious purposes, of course.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. It's exactly like that. I think it is true at once. I think the interpretation is true, and I think that's what you're getting at, Darren, is that ultimately the what it is that we're communicating with is less important than the fact that there is an inherent danger to this practice, particularly under certain conditions. And perhaps it is a bit irresponsible for corporate America, like Parker Brothers, to basically promote this as a board game.
I was trying to interview Brian Goldner, who was the CEO of Hasbro during the Ouija films of current or of recent times, which kind of coincided with my research when it kind of exploded in 2009. I was trying to reach Goldner, which Chris Cox is currently the CEO of Hasbro, and he's kind of bringing more modernity to, I don't know him personally, but I know that they use the Ouija board in some very horror like the way it was depicted in these Ouija films, which were paid for by Hasbro and produced by Hasbro. It's for them to say it's only a game and then use that in horror productions. It's a thin line between, is that dirty pool?
Yeah.
What's going on on a corporate level? That's a whole different thing. But when Knott's Berry Farm created their Zozo virtual reality deal, that's when it's just getting way out of hand. You pay money to go into a scare zone with a huge Ouija board and this real demon, jumps out from the middle of the table. Now, there's a lot of money spent in that production. And it's crazy how this type of phenomenon can almost become, Brian, is egregoric out. Egregore is kind of a man-made entity. Well, like the Slender Man, where it's kind of, we know it's man-made, but it's still real. There's been an element of that to the Zozo phenomena that's gone totally unexplained. That I think, I know you said you got your own personal feelings about it, but it's manifested into something that's pretty crazy.
Well, see, I think that it comes back to most of these, whether you're talking about Satan, whether you're talking about some of these darker manifestations, even like vampires and these mythical creatures that are sort of the personification of various types of evil or different manifestations of evil. I really think it all comes back down to the parent archetype of the shadow, the primary Jungian archetype, this darker side of human nature, which in ancient Jewish theology was Yetzer Hara. That's actually the serpent that's in the tree in the Garden of Eden that Adam and Eve encounter that leads to the fall. It is a personification of humanity's proclivity to engage and indulge in the darkness. Instead of making good, wholesome decisions, it tends to be more gravitating towards the more taboo or darker side of things. And Zozo, I think, is indeed absolutely an egregore out of the collective unconscious, built into perhaps the DNA of humanity, which is why you see it across so many thousands of years, perhaps, and is very active today because of the interest. But I think really ultimately what it is just another modern day manifestation of the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
It's certainly a modern demonic twist.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, and it was weird when I spoke at WouijaCon years ago in Baltimore, which was basically the home of the Ouija board back in 1891 when it was, invented, and they hung it on a subway. And there's some pretty funny stories about all this. But anyway, to make a long story short, whenever I was kind of saved for last during the 3-day event, most everybody was proponents of the board.
Yeah,
I felt alienated, and people, and it was very controversial, and I'm not very well liked by members of the Talking Board Historical Society. Even though I'm friends with two of their most academic sources, and they, thank God for people that can debate stuff and get along.
Yeah.
Which is a very rare trait today's thing.
Isn't that the truth?
It's a dying art.
Yeah, it is.
But the current chairman, I believe, is Karen Dahlman. She's a friend of mine. She was good friend of Rosemary Ellen Guiley, who's co-author of the Zozo Phenomenon book that we wrote. And unfortunately, Rosemary passed shortly after we wrote the Zozo Phenomenon. And I'm, regardless of whether I do a collaboration with the paranormal or music, I love to write music. I love to write lyrics and guitar parts and piano. I've been learning piano for several years. The creative essence of everything that I do is what keeps me going. But basically, I've gotten to a lot of debates about whether or not the Ouija board is dangerous or not.
Yeah.
And I kind of let history tell the story, you know. And a lot of people don't look at history, and they don't look at what it would be. I think it would be a disjustice to history if we did not, before the stigma of the Ouija board, before the modern invention of talking boards, before the Hollywood jump scare, there were numerous reports of creepy exchanges with dark entities on not just Ouija boards, but planchets, dial devices, all these ways that we communicate with the spirit world. And so are we to deny these negative experiences, or are we to weigh everything out and just, make our minds up based on our own experiences, but also those in history? Why not?
Yeah.
And the intent, and I think fear plays a major role. And we can talk about fear for a while, how it plays into these Ouija sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I've told my story before on the show, so I don't want to labor the point. But my eldest sister was murdered, and some years before, Ouija boards were things that she was into, and like it wasn't taboo where I grew up. It was like fine. Even grandparents took part in this thing, and they just saw it as a joke and what have you, until one day she stopped. The Ouija board was in the bin. She'd used a glass, not a planchette. We'd made it ourselves, actually, right, on a tray. We stuck letters on it, and we used a glass. And she destroyed it because, and it transpired that whatever she was communicating with said, "I'm going to stab you." 10 years later, she was stabbed to death. Now, I'm not excusing the person that did that, and he went to jail and he then killed himself. But for me, I that's a really vivid memory, because I was very young when the Ouija thing happened, and then I was kind of coming of age. I was just joined the police when she was killed. So, notwithstanding what we've said about archetypes and the use of that and all of that, and I think that's all legitimate that Bishop Bryan was talking about. My own view is, and I'm not saying this, because I'm a Catholic priest wagging my finger. I'm saying it from my own experience. My view is that it's so. For me, I think there's a high risk in using Ouija boards. That because that's been what's happened in my family.
I've had interesting interactions too in high school with my best friend. We messed around with the Ouija board, didn't think nothing of it. We're in the back of my AMC Rambler in the middle of a cornfield, and we made communication with something. It was not Zozo, but it was something that basically we were asking questions about our future and the stupid questions kids ask, when are we going to die, all that crap. Well, it basically said that we would both be in the military. We'd both go to the West. She ended up joining the Navy years later, was stationed in Washington. I joined the Army, went to Korea. At the time, neither one of us had even thought about joining the military. And then it said that my death age would be 37. Not exactly correct, but when I was 39 is when I was hit by the drunk driver and I was killed, but I was brought back
3 times.
3 times, yeah.
So you did have a death experience.
I passed away 3 times, yeah. So, that's why I hadn't touched a Ouija board ever again until we did that shoot with Darren and Patty. So I was a little apprehensive, but I knew that I was with people who knew what they were doing, so I was able to get through it. But I haven't touched one since either, and I won't. So there's
I think
something to be
it's,
said.
Important that you were amongst people that you trusted.
Absolutely.
And that had an impact despite Zozo showing up. None of us were fearful of it.
No.
Yeah.
Patty dismissed it, and if I remember correctly, it kind of changed behavior, so to speak. So you know, it's a roll of dice of what comes through. But you know, if spirits exist, it would be irresponsible to suggest that they are probably either all malevolent or all benign. It makes more sense that these unseen agencies probably are a balance of good and evil, and that seems to be when we talk to these things on Ouija boards. They seem to have elements of both characteristics of good and evil, and you know, it can be a tug of war, mindfully of what we're dealing with, and that's so common to so many experiences. The fact remains that the overwhelming scale of talking board exchanges are of a very creepy and negative nature.
Yeah.
The unseen employing deceptive, fearful methods of communication, whether that negativity originates from our own minds or from outside sources, it doesn't change the validity of 150 years of experience with talking boards.
That's
That's
true.
what people don't get.
Well, I mean,
You want to see a danger of a Ouija board right here. See that scar? Big old butcher knife? That was from
yeah.
my ex-wife that was using Ouija boards behind my back.
Yeah.
That was after the filming of Ghost Adventure.
Oh, did it? That was after the episode.
Is it it was the same one that was affected in the episode, right?
Bitch tried to kill me.
Yeah. Yep.
And not just me, but other people, you know. And so I know people hate to hear it, but I have always dealt with the dark side of this, you know, many experiences that I've seen, and I can tell you story after story after story that I've been involved with that would blow people. There's no logic behind any of it.
Your intuition is your intuition is really like obvious. Like, you're a very intuitive person. I mean, you know, the first thing you do is come on the show. You say, "Oh, Chris, have you heard of Father Barry May?" Well, Father Barry May, like me, is a former police officer. He died in 2015. A former police officer that became a priest and an exorcist. It's like, you know, we were talking about archetypes before. Somebody mentioned in the comments, like that. Now, that's not a freak event for you. You've honed your intuition. You've clearly spent time or invested energy in figuring out things more than the mere surface of life. So you know,
Chris, I just had a really good vibe about you. Not knowing you and everything, I picked up on some things. There's something about you that I picked up on. Yes, and it's good to have that diversity. I did not know that Brian and Jamie had additional help or interviewers on the show, so it's nice to have that. You know.
It was you were back on the days, Darren, when
a tool.
you were the last time you were on the show. It was audio only, and it was really just, I think, Jamie and myself. We've made some improvements over the years.
Oh, definitely. You guys have come a long way.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but you know, I think that Brian's one of the smartest people that I've ever talked to. Period. He sent me one of his early books, and the knowledge that he has, it just flows from him. But religion teaches us that fear is of the devil, and so how difficult is it for people to see that fear is used by the demonic world, that we have choices in life, and that we can either deal with the demonic, or we can choose to ignore it, or we can, like Brian emphasized earlier, about the biggest trick or the biggest thing the devil ever did was convince us that it doesn't exist. And that seems to be more going on now than ever before.
And the other thing is, look at who the demonic. So, we're taught the Christian religion teaches perfect love drives out all fear, right? And if you look at the people who are wrestling with possession, with darkness, who almost become obsessive with things that are not good, they're often people who find it hard to love other people, or other people find hard to love, right? And it's why so often, the primary role of the clergy, for example, is actually to display God's love for all people, no matter how fallen they are. And the only wisdom that should come from learning more about theology that priests do at seminary is to learn how to love people that are the most difficult to love, because that's the only thing that's going to lead people away from fear. That's it. There's nothing else. And actually, it's an act of love. I've only seen Ghost Adventures from the outside, but clearly in those episodes where they're wrestling with forces of darkness, it's even an act of love simply for Zach and you guys to be invested in them.
Based on my experiences with people, and I've dealt with literally hundreds of people that have contacted me through the years because of Zozo and different Z-named entities, and not just what I call Z entities or Zozo, but other Ouija board experiences. People, they email me and they come to me for advice. They come to me for various reasons and throughout the years. And because of that, it's caused me to adjust my research accordingly. For instance, the oldest mentioning of Zozo phenomenon is I discovered by total accident, and because of a foreign exchange student from Tibet who warned me that there were several students that died in a particular school that they were going to high up in the mountains, in which an old man would push people off the ridge, the cliff. And I'm like, what? And I started looking up Tibetan demonology, and I run across an amazing prophecy that was it was deciphered from a professor of Asian studies. His name evades me at the moment, but he's a significant author of Chinese and pre-Zen Tibetan demonology, and he was able to prophesy something that I'll share with you real quick that I found to be one of my most significant findings in this whole, I think, Zozo phenomenon, because it almost reads like it's been ripped out of today's modern headline. And you guys were talking about the conception of time earlier and how humans perceive this time. And in early Tibetan demonology, these were, the conception of time was, not as linear as it is now. But getting to the oldest mentioning of Zozo that I've found is in the 8th century. In Tibetan demonology, at the time of the kings of Yarlung, the time which passed is conceived in a cyclic form, and I'm reading from the prophecy now. It is not linear as believed today in the West, it is discontinuous. Humanity passes successively ages of different kinds. Now, I had this translated from French. And so it was translated from Tibetan into French, and I had it translated into English, and that's what I'm reading to you now. That humanity passes successively through different ages, and that these long durations, they seem to be numbered in tens of thousands of years. But during the time of origins, a kind of golden age, it is the epoch that follows the creation of the world by the gods. It is located in past passes, a happy past, pomp, prosper. Men and gods are not separated. Being and all that will populate the earth are concentrated in heaven. They descend in turn, beginning with King, what's his name? I can't pronounce it. Founder of the Yarlung dynasty, 1,000 legends, like that of the yak and the horse. tell of how the earth is populated by beings from heaven. This age of origins lasts 10,000 years. The end, under the reign of the 13th king of Yarland Dynasty, the age of declines appears. The circumstances which put an end to the age of origin are very peculiar. Until then, the lord of the demons, a man named Zozo, was enclosed in the 9th story under the ground inside 9 citadels of copper. He is unhappily released by the king, the 13th king of Yarland. The king himself is attained with its power. 2 elements that protect this person, we do not know if it is objects, animals, or even gods, abandon the body of heaven. Thus begins the age of declines, and evil religion releases upon mankind, and the power of Zozo and the demons becomes stronger. Now, this is actual prophecy, guys.
Yeah.
And so I won't continue, but it's disturbing.
It definitely is. Hold that thought, Darren. We're going to take our last break here. Stay on the line. Also, we're getting some reports of feedback, so make sure your Skype volume is all the way down, and just use the audio on your phone going forward. I think that should resolve it. Okay, we're going to be back in just a few moments. Don't go away.
This fire is burning.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been having an incredible conversation with our special guest, Darren Evens, this evening. It's been fantastic, as it was expected to be. Now it's time for you to ask your questions and call into the show. That's our preference. The number to call is 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 to get placed into the queue. That's 855-4111. We'll have that number up on the screen here in just a moment, so you won't be able to forget it. And it's also in the chats on the various platforms, and call in. Otherwise, we'll be taking questions directly from the various chats, and Jamie, Father Chris, and Brandon have been collecting them for our guest tonight. So we'll be hopefully able to get to all of them. But we'll be back here in just a moment to do just that. Don't go away. Okay, we are now back to take your questions and to go through them. And remember to call into the show. I'm going to put that number up on screen right now so that you can do just that. But Jamie, let's go ahead and get to the first question for Darren tonight.
Well, the one I saw, because I don't have my phone, looking on here, one from Laura, a really good one. Could Zozo be another metaphysical name for the devil or part of the devil's hierarchy?
What do you think of that, Darren?
That's a great question. That's always been asked. If we look at demonic names, there's across the board, whether it be in the Goetia or we have names like Pazuzu. We have a dangerous demonic name Karanzan, which all spell the same thing. And so, if you look at their gematria and numerical equivalents of 333, these exist. I look at these things and I look at parallels between the demonic names and trying to. I have been contacted by an Italian theologian that didn't want to reveal his name, but he emailed me years ago thinking that it was a demon's name that starts with P. And there's various reasons for. Who knows? But here's one of the funny things about this. We're not funny, but do we look at these names that are found in Necromonicon and other Egyptian books, or various books of the dead, biblical apocrypha? Do we concentrate on those names, or do we also reflect on the more modernization names that are coming forth and revealing themselves in these Ouija sessions? And with the advent of the internet, I'm able to look at hundreds of Ouija sessions, not just sent to me, but ones that are available in story forms across the internet throughout the years that I've been able to look at, and using, even if it's been deleted, you can go in and look at various ways to capture screenshots of what's been put out there before. Because here's what's weird in my research. I've read things about particular in studying the letter Z, how it's been eliminated in various languages throughout history because of its demonic association, because of the creepiness involved. It was eliminated from early Latin because of the mere pronunciation of the name caused the face to do what they call the rictus of death. A freshly digging up corpse. When you say Z, it caused the face, the mere pronunciation.
There's that Joker smile.
And in literature, I've found that the word Zo has a power. Not only the letter Z, and how it's been. There's all kinds of crazy stuff with how it's been determined that insurance statistics have proven that if you have it in the license plate, that it's tied to more fatalities. And I don't try to scare people with this stuff, but it's true. I put this information out there because I think somebody's got to do it. And so there seems to be a parallel between the demonic realm and the letter Z. And it's not uncommon for the letter Z and the S to be interchangeable throughout magical text and grimoire. And I found grimoire, written in various editions of the 1800s. It's called the Dictionary Infernal. It describes Zozo as an actual demon that was involved in a possession case in 1816 in Italy. And so the very, and then going back even further, I found literature that explains that an early pope described Zozo as a mass of demons, the commune omnium daemonum, which means a combination of all the demons. And so are we looking at, and perhaps the most peculiar thing that maybe Brian can explain is in typical Catholic demonology and exorcism. I've interviewed several different exorcists throughout my days, and they all claim that the understanding of the name gives you power over that specific demon. And so that doesn't seem to attribute to Zozo, and that's pretty perplexing in the demonic world. And so, Brian, let me interview you for a minute. What do you think about that aspect of it?
I mean, that is unusual. I've never actually encountered Zozo in the field, so I've never really had a case where we had to work to remove Zozo. So I don't have any personal experience to share in terms of how it would have responded to those particular rites of the church that first in. Of course, the solemn rite of exorcism, getting the name is one of the...
Do you think we're dealing with a collective thing, more as opposed to an individuation?
I do think it's collective. I think it is absolutely the primary egregore that's out there, at least as far as evil goes, as far as what we call evil. And I think that in itself could explain why merely the name. The other thing I think it could be is that I'm not entirely sure that is the true name of this particular entity. I think it might actually be more of an incantation that increases its power versus as a way perhaps to conceal its name so that nobody could have control over it. I have a suspicion about that, but then again, I have no personal experience with Zozo outside of the first time I encountered it was when I did the Ouija board many years ago. It would have been 1993. And for whatever reason, we were doing the Ouija that night and never had anything strange like that happen. And this particular night, usually we would get really good coherent sentences that told very interesting stories. And this particular night, all the Ouija board would do is keep going back and forth from Z to O, from Z to O. That's all it would do. So that was the first time I encountered it. And the second time was with all of you, with Patty and you at the bar in Vegas that we live streamed for everybody. So I've never actually encountered it in the field as an exorcist. I've never been. Did you
get really sick after that Ouija board? I mean, did you, or was that before? You got really sick, right?
I was. You mean in Vegas? You're talking in Vegas?
I was saying after Vegas, right? It was like before the pandemic. You were in Vegas.
Yes,
if I remember.
I don't think it was that trip.
We did the first show, the Halloween show in 2018,
right.
October of 2018, before the pandemic.
Right.
And then it was like,
2019.
I remember you got really sick, Brian. It was like
I caught COVID in Vegas. I thought, well, I think it was Alpha. We didn't have tests back then, but it would have been January of 2020.
Exactly.
And
I think I did the same thing.
Yeah, and it was the Alpha, and it was really bad. I mean, it stayed with me for like 2 months. The first month was the respiratory. That didn't get into my lungs, but it was like definitely a really bad flu that would not go away. And then the second month, it was all intestinal.
Yeah.
And then it went away. Then I didn't have it again. Until then the Delta, I caught them all. I caught all of them, but I never really went to go get tested, so I can't confirm it. I just went by the symptoms I was having. But yeah, I did get sick after that. I did.
Well, it's, I think we were going to have the new owner of the Zozo Demon House call in, but I think she's gone night. I don't think she's going to call in, but let me tell you guys, they were still having issues there. And, this may be a little off topic with Ouija boards, but my sons were experimenting with boards behind my back when I lived there, and I wasn't doing, but I was researching them in 2009. And everyone that's lived in that house, Brian, has experienced paranormal phenomenon. And there's, the new owner recently contacted me, and I thought things had calmed down because I've interviewed 4 different families that have lived there. And all of them claim different paranormal, but they all seem to have similarities.
Yeah.
And these similarities that this lady has now is uncanny, and so we've contacted Ghost Adventures, and I hope that they invite you and the good sister to come along and let's help this family out because they're having problems. I have reached out to the show, and they are aware of the situation. And so I hope that something comes about because I've just reestablished contact with her earlier today, and she's having some issues,
Let her know, Darren. Let her know to fill out the intake form on our website so I can produce an official case with our office with her, and then I can forward that to Ghost Adventures and maybe have a conversation with them about it to see if we could all go out together because that would be an interesting episode, and it certainly would be an interesting case to work.
Yeah, maybe a case if she was just too nervous to call in.
Yeah.
So.
And, I have checked on people that have lived there periodically, and, it's just, what it is. But, this family needs help to have kids, and I'm hoping that I'm, reaching out to, I don't know. I haven't, talked to Zach. I haven't been on the show in a long time. Now you guys have, and I don't know what my relationship is with him, but I am reaching out to the show at this point because I've been asked to, and I don't ever do that. I've never reached out to the show other than my own, personal involvement. But, so we got that going on. And, I know we're getting, we've been on there's still so much that we haven't talked about, but thanks for having me back on. We can go for hours on this, topic, of Ouija, how it pertains to spirit communication. That's one of the biggest, another thing that bothers me is people often say that Ouija is the same thing as radio communication, ITC, and it's like, wow, why do people think that? It's two totally different things in my opinion. But I'm glad we're able to debate these types of things. They're very important that we're able to get along and be able to discuss them, in an intelligent manner without there being how it is.
I do. Brandon, what's our next question for Darren?
We kind of touched on this a little bit in the second part, but not fully.
Okay.
It comes from Gina on Facebook. Do you think Ouija experiences could vary depending on the mental state of the participants and what they want to get out of it?
I heard an echo on that. Can you repeat it? Or can Brian repeat it?
Go ahead and repeat it, Brandon, since you have the full question in front of you.
Okay. Do you think Ouija experiences could vary depending on the mental state of the participants and what they want to get out of it?
Absolutely.
I don't think you want to be drunk
There's
or
been
high.
a lot talk about that. Is your mental condition can have everything to do with a, are you being monitored by the demonic realm? Many times in these Ouija sessions, it has the communication aspect. Whatever we're communicating, it has the aspect or the intelligence to prey upon the weakest link in the room. Even though you may not even be on the board, these intelligences have the ability to focus on the weakest link of personality types or mental conditions, whether you may be on drugs or alcohol. They have the ability to pick up on this and influence their agenda accordingly. And so that's very important that you realize that your mental condition going into a session, whether it be of a Ouija board or any type of spirit communication, you need to be grounded and you need to be very well cautious and aware of your surroundings and an open mind and not be clouded by negativity or various mental conditions brought about by drugs, alcohol, medications.
Demonic forces basically act on the will. So, if you're being targeted by a negative entity, by a demon, then they can't make you do anything wrong. But they it's why often they wake people up, right? I mean, the whole witching hour, the 3 a.m. to mock the crucifixion, to deprive you of sleep, to lead you to drug, alcohol, because all these things erode your will, erode your ability to make sensible decisions. And so that, just like if a regime wants to torture you, basically they use the same tactics. They keep you awake, they injure you, they poison relationships with people, they get you on substances that alter your mental state. So these are the things that affect our ability to choose to do the right thing. So if you want to resist it, then you've got to make sure those things are not part of your experience, as much as you can, yourself.
And I can tell you that many crimes have been committed because of Ouija boards. I'm currently in the research stage, talking about one of the strangest cases ever, the Oklahoma Ouija murder case, which is an amazing, fascinating case that I've been digging into recently and have uncovered amazing information, unreleased information that I've actually had to talk to police about, involving the Grady County Sheriff's Office and County Courthouse. Looking into this case, mind-boggling. The way the Ouija board has influenced this woman, who is found not guilty by reason of insanity. Well, looking into this case, and it's one of the most fascinating cases I've ever looked into. And I started looking into it by mistake, just looking at the dangers of the Ouija board. And I've been able to uncover some. I had to go to a graveyard and find some twins that were buried there, and I actually used devices to find their grave as I'm walking by this different gravestones. My devices are speaking the names of the deceased as I'm walking by, and I've got video evidence of this. Crazy stuff, wow. That I haven't talked about really. I'm not supposed to talk about it. But anyway, to make a long story, I don't know how much time do we have, Brian?
We've got maybe about 25 minutes.
Okay. Anyway, the book that I'm currently excited about as far as releasing is some, untold information is involving a case in 2001 in which a lady by the name of Carol, I'm not going to say her last name, but Carol, she murdered her son-in-law in cold blood in front of some children and in front of her daughter-in-law, and then took off and tried to murder her children, or her people that were with her daughter-in-laws, and tried to murder them as well, and was basically broke both legs in an automobile accident that she did on purpose, and it was later captured by police. all this was under the direct influence of a Ouija communication. And I have talked to prosecutors, I've talked to attorneys that are involved in this case, and it's mind-blowing how the unraveling of this woman's life, who was never involved in any type of domestic violence, no type of any type of police involvement, suddenly murders her son-in-law under the direction of a Ouija board. And there is a name involved that I'm not going to discuss right now, but as you can imagine, and this ties into perhaps the Exorcist case, which was based, as we know, on a real case involving, a Robbie Doe, whatever you want to call his fictitious name, in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Which involved, there was a secret diary that was never supposed to be, introduced to the public, but it was found in their drawer after the exorcism, and it describes during the exorcism process of this young man, there were words that showed up on the young man's skin, and one of those words was the no. It appeared on the wrists and the upper thighs. The words no would appear, but if you take that no and if you turn it sideways, what does it say?
Yeah, interesting. So
and so that's never been discussed before. But we have these connections and these similar. What I've always found is these bizarre synchronicities, and when we talk about the word Zoe and the opposite Oz, there seems to be a definite play, almost a magical interplay between those two terms, sigils, whatever they may be. And if you look at the Hebrew gematria of the word Oz, has a very positive meaning. But if you switch the numbers, or every letter has a corresponding numerical value, as well as color and vibration in Hebrew gematria. When you switch the Oz and turn it to Zoe, guess what happens? The opposite of good happens.
Yeah.
Evil. And so these things matter, I think, Brian. I mean, we have all these connections.
Yeah.
To tell a story, as to what this thing, is it actually demonic? Is it evil, or is it, what is it we're dealing with? We don't know.
Brandon, I noticed that you had something that you wanted to say. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. So kind of wanted your opinion, Darren, on something. So I'm not going to name names or mention the group, but there is a particular group that hosts investigations, or I should say parties, at a location that we've been to quite frequently. And what they do there is they have a bring your own beer policy and allow a Ouija board usage. What is your opinion on that? Do you condone it or do you condemn it?
I think that's easy.
I got to be honest. I don't recommend it. But again, we had me and Brian and Jamie and Patty Negri using a board at a bar in Vegas. I mean,
and we all had more than a few that night, I think.
We were we were spiritually mature.
We might have pulled one out in a Ouija, in a Chinese restaurant. I mean, It doesn't, it's a roll of the dice. And I wouldn't recommend it. I think it's fascinating that when I use one at a haunted location, because it usually seems to pick up on something that I wasn't aware of, which can tie into the investigation. But the flip side of that, and I've actually been kicked out of a major paranormal group here in Oklahoma, because they kept getting EVPs of Zozo while I was present during an investigation. So am I contaminating the haunting? Am I making things worse?
Yeah.
These are questions that go on in the minds of paranormal investigators, and I got to be honest, I don't have any magical answers as when it comes to ridding oneself of these entities. I have some ideas that have worked. It seem to have different, depending on their belief systems, but we can go on all night about ridding one, banishment rituals, or whatever your belief systems are. But I think it's healthy to avoid any negative spirit communication, regardless of whether it's ITC. If something's coming through in a negative manner, shut it down. Whether it's a board or whether it's radio communication, if it's of a negative, let's not dwell on the negative. Let's avoid it. Let's turn something. Let's turn a negative into a positive if we can. And I think that's important. But I continue to research this stuff, guys. I do stuff in my garage. You see, I've got a board and I've got some friends here. I just broke them out tonight just for added benefit. But you know, those are actually some real raggy hands. But you know, they're telling the difference between the real ones, and and they're not possessed. But I tell you what I can do.
If I see one of them things,
I can open up some stuff. I'll open up an ITC, I'll open up one of my gadgets, and I guarantee it'll say something to do with what you're looking at. I mean, it's incredible, and I think that's one reason why I'm kind of called into investigations is because when I do, weird things happen, whether it's on a board or whether I use other means of communication. It's a lifelong fascination, and I'm never surprised really what happens, because you have to have an open mind, and you have to be aware that we are swimming in a spiritual world, guys, and they're everywhere. And I wish you all the best of luck and success in your searching for the truth. And when it comes to Ouija boards, I'll continue to warn people of the dangers, like the self-prophecy of asking questions pertaining to the future is a dangerous thing, and that's been scientifically proven. So there are real dangers involved. And so thank you again for having me on.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, and you're always welcome. You're one of our guests that has open invitation, Darren. You know that. Father Chris, have you seen any other questions from the chat for Darren?
Yeah. So one is kind of related to the last one, but Laura asked, I've learned demons run in packs and there's a hierarchy. I think I learned that on this channel. I can't remember. So any comments on the way that demons work together?
That's always been a fascinating part of demonology, is the various hierarchies involved with the various demons, whether it be, considered the fallen angels of Satan, Leviathan, all these different demonic names. They have a structure, they have a hierarchy. And so when we look at the letter Z, though, I find fascinating is, how they gravitate towards that letter. And if we look at a lot of the literature and research that I've found is given, there seems to be a lot of anecdotal evidence that there seems to be a weird power with the letter Z. So that may be why these entities use this letter in some magical realm. But it's still recent. I mean, we can't prove anything, but this is modern demonology, guys. And so it's something I'm going to continue. It hasn't killed me yet. But I continue to use it for the right purposes. I don't use boards around children or at my house. I rarely use boards, period. But I do research people that do, and the stories and the things that continue to happen when you use Ouija board.
I wonder sometimes if how you mentioned that there seems to be some kind of magical occult properties to the letter Z and the sound that it makes. Creation was brought into existence through God's utterances. And so I wonder sometimes if this is not an inversion of that in some way, or a bastardization of those principles. I mean, certainly incantations work on this principle. In ceremonial magic, there are various utterances that are used vibrationally to connect with different aspects in different realms. The Z sound is unique. It's a very vibrational sound, right? Even S is as well. As he says,
animals hate it. If you say zzz to an animal, they hate it.
They hate it. Yeah, that's true. It's almost like a growling reaction. I know that sometimes when you get up to your cat and growl, I mean, they'll react to that, and they do react to the Z sound in much the same way if you continuously keep repeating it. So it seems to be perhaps a vibrational thing in my mind, that it might actually tap into those lower vibrations that we associate with the demonic?
The father of chaos magic used to sign his art. Austin Spare, the famous artist who studied under Aleister Crowley, would sign his artwork with ZOS, which caused Jimmy Page to buy up all his artwork and all the, of course, Jimmy Page, Zeppelin lived in the Boleskine Mansion on the shores of Loch Ness, and where Crowley supposedly had a lot of demonic, ceremonial incantations that took place. And so there's that Zeppelin connection. There's this whole fascinating realm as to again, Brian, you're right. The pronunciation of the letter Z and how there's an early Zen scholar that says that there's properties of the demonic realm called the Zo and the Ma. That the Zo cause that the more you learn in this Buddhist type of pre-Zen Buddhism, that the teachers or the followers would start rocking back and forth, not unlike the rainbow, what I say is the rainbow fashion. But here, there's still a lot of complexities involved. There's still a lot of people that don't believe that. They think the Zozo thing is full of shit. And one of them is Michelle Warren, author of the Encyclopedia of the Demonic. She doesn't believe any of this Zozo shit. So I'm not trying to force feed it down people's throats, but there's something to it, guys. And I've done enough research and have talked enough about it and the characteristics of no matter what language that you say this Zo term, there's something weird about it, and there's something that connects it to the demonic realm. And so my voice is going out. I've been singing some Leonard Skinner earlier, and so the voice is going out. But guys, it's a real thing. Whether or not it's its real name, it doesn't really matter. It uses this name to cause fear, to cause a magical manifestation, so to speak. And so I encourage people to be careful when using the letter Z in anything. And I intend on doing a lot more research about this craziness that seems to be, also evident throughout literature. Other people have discussed it, not just me.
Breaking down what we've extrapolated from tonight's conversation, we can almost put together a picture here that might make some sense. So one of the things that we've tried to understand is, what is this thing? Is Zozo a name? And if it is a name, what is a name of? Is it a singular entity as some kind of manifestation, egregore? And I think all of the above is true here. But perhaps it is ultimately a manifestation, a projection of the demonic realm itself, the entirety of it. And that might be why it isn't easily controllable by just simply using the name to control the thing, because it's not really a name. It is the access point to the entire realm of all things that we consider to be demonic.
It's the password to get into the door?
Could it be?
To open up the...
Could it be? Like literally a type of portal, dare I say, even though I don't really like that term in paranormal. I think it's overused.
You guys were talking about the Akashic. The Akashic is Sanskrit for the invisible.
Yeah.
What is magic? The invisible. What is faith? It's all interconnected. Whether it be Jewish mysticism and the Enochian that's left out of the Bible, that isn't talked about, except Brian talks about it, but it's everything's connected, and our interpretation is what it is. We all have our own paradigms, our own realities that we have to deal with. And so I just continue to exercise caution when it comes to spirit communication, especially when we put our hands on the infamous planchette.
Well, good advice. I don't want to miss any other questions. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I haven't seen any.
Anybody? Brandon, do you see anything else?
No, I did see a comment from Danielle.
All right.
For you. She said, when I was trying to sing opera, we would chant Z because it makes the whole of the human body vibrate and opens vibration chambers in the head.
Well, there you go.
So that goes back to the idea that it's sort of an entry point.
So it may be a key to that vibrational frequency.
It could very well be.
Opens up the gates.
Bees will use it. There's a lot of literature about this, the sound of the letter Z, as well as the gematria, the numerical, the numerology. It's all connected, and it's very fascinating stuff. How, for instance, in 1964, a book that was written by Alan Patterson called the something of prophecy. Anyway, in this book, he was messing with a Ouija board, and something by the name of Zozo manifested through the board and temporarily possessed him. In a book written in 1953 called "Saucers Are Among Us" by George Ham, early UFOologist, he discusses using a Ouija board and talking to something called Zozo. So this is all over the place, and so what are we dealing with? We don't know, but I'm going to continue to research it, and we'll see where it all goes. But I hope to be on the show again. Hopefully not in another 3 years, but maybe before.
Yeah, let's definitely make sure that you get on. We're going to try to open up a larger season. We're doing 16, 17 episodes this time. It's the largest season we've ever had. And Brandon, now that I've got help, I can kind of expand a bit, and let's definitely have you on as a regular.
I love where you're going with it, guys. It's really cool.
Awesome. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I mean, I enjoy doing it. It's a great show, and it's really, we talk about things that no one else out there is. Anything else? Any other questions?
Darren, can you explain to the audience real quick, because there is a companion name that comes with Zozo a lot on the board, and isn't that Mama? Can you explain that? Yeah, can you explain where that comes in?
Just to add to that quickly, because earlier on, really early on in the chat, somebody had mentioned, Lisa had mentioned that the name Zaza had come through, and she was hoping it wasn't the female counterpart.
Yeah, the stories on the internet of Zaza predate Zozo, a lot of them, and that happens to be Jimmy Page's daughter and Aleister Crowley's daughter named Zaza. As well as the opening of the gates to hell in a pronunciation that Aleister Crowley used to summon Karanzan. The opening and closing involved the pronunciation of that word, and so yes, there is a connection there. There are many stories of people using spirit communication in that term, and also Mama and Ma, and again, Ma was described by this pre-Zen Buddhist, spiritual teacher that went into details about the demonic realm being consisting of the Zozo realm and the Ma realm. Now, how coincidental is that? That these things are manifesting through Ouija boards, and then through research we find in literature mentioning of the same thing. And so it causes one to really have to examine reality, and where are we at? Where do we fit in all this? It's fascinating.
It is. I mean, it really makes you, I think that's the whole point. The point of this show anyway is to question reality, not lose reality, but to perhaps better understand what reality is. And it might not be exactly what we believe it to be or take it for granted. I'm looking at a question that just came in, a comment that just came in on Facebook from Gene. Odd thought, but the Latin script letter Z is one of the symbols on the Russian military vehicles, maybe overreading the Z.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy. I've got screenshots of actual ZO on the back of tanks that were used in brutal murders. And the Soviets using the letter Z and ZO in an effort to instill fear in aggression. I didn't touch upon that, but that's true. Mm-hmm. And so again, it's manifesting in ways that we don't expect. And again, it's fascinating how this letter Z is always associated with these bad, evil agendas and so forth, and how it's adopted. And because of that, the mere knowledge of it, and that's another danger of just, if you being a Catholic background, when you seek the demonic, you will find it, mm-hmm. And it will find you. And there's so many different aspects of it, and the synchronicities involved between Zoe and Oz. For interesting reading, check out Jake Gotts's rant in Z minor. He discusses how Zoe and Oz and he doesn't even know me, and he brought all this stuff up. And media, how Zoe happens to show up in like the in different films involving evil characters, and how Zoe and Oz seem to have a magical symbiotic relationship. And so there's a lot of things that we don't really talk about involving this phenomenon, rabbit holes that we can go down that seem to, the more you talk about it, the more you dig, the more you find. And so I've collected bones throughout my career, and they form skeletons, and it's like, how far do we go with it? But I put what's out there, for people to, make up their own minds. I never try to, try to convince people that this stuff is real. But if you bring me along in a paranormal investigation and I use a Ouija board and it tells something about your brother that I never knew, and something that's, like on the Ghost Adventures episode, it really fucked with them. They didn't know they didn't understand why he was doing that. And I've told them repeatedly, I'm not responsible for what comes through.
Yeah, I remember that episode.
I'm the vessel.
Pretty shaking for Jay. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it is.
Yeah, it was a freaky deal.
It's unsettling when you encounter it. It's unexpected. Even the GAC, who are truly looking for these kinds of things, I think it even takes them back a step and says, it's shocking when you encounter
There's
it.
an unpredictable reality. Yeah. It's so unpredictable, guys. It's such a roll of the dice. When we were in the museum and had the Tesla coil machine going, the Jacob's ladder going, there was an unbelievable aura inside that place, but nothing was moving on the planchet yet.
Right.
But we got ripped out of there before things were just ramping up. There's no telling what would have came through.
I can't even imagine.
But
that was
we had to get out of there, and I think that there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, guys. It's crazy.
On a related matter, there were lots of comments about people who'd been frightened or scared, having done Ouija boards or what have you. Have you got any advice for? I mean, I've got my own advice, but they're not asking me. Have you got any advice? Any advice for what how would you advise somebody who's kind of had a bit of a terrifying experience on what to practically do about it?
Fear is an element that, again, we touched upon it. I think that these entities seek it. They thrive on it. They feed upon it. And so the more fear that you have going into a session, I think the more chance, of course, that you're going to manifest something that's, the laws of attraction state that we are attracted to that which is likened to itself. So the more grounded we are, and the more positive we are, then the more expectations of the positivity, I think it really does influence what comes through. But I've tried this before and had negative things happen, even though nothing but positive, and there was a shaman there, there was blowing of smoke, and a smudging, and yet something still evil came through. But when we were in Vegas out in the desert, and Joshua and I were attempting to summon UFOs, there was nothing negative that came through. And it was perhaps one of the most powerful sessions that I've ever been involved with. And so it's all a roll of the dice, guys, and you've got to be prepared for what happens. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
True.
It is about preparation. It is about knowing what you're getting yourself into. I think that's the biggest deficit in paranormal research today, particularly all of the amateur interest that is out there. Because, of course, let's face it, it's fascinating. And when you have a true, genuine...
what do most people do for their paranormal experience? They look to a Ouija board.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, because it tends to provoke. It tends to be one that you get results with. I mean, honestly, I can't deny that. That's where my first dabbling into the paranormal was a Ouija board. So I get it.
Mine too.
Yeah. Most of ours are. I think most people will say that, at least protect from our time. Today, now they might try EVP because there's a whole lot of choices out there. But back when, in the 70s and 80s, you didn't really know what EVP was quite yet.
Ouija boards or tarot cards. That's
it. Ouija boards and tarot cards. And tarot cards were more of a novelty. Ouija boards were easier to find. You could go to the toy store and get them.
Yeah, the dowsing rods too.
The dowsing rods? Yeah. I didn't have those.
Tarot cards needed more expertise.
I think that's what it is. They were too complicated.
Yeah.
Too complicated to use.
Dowsing rods really work. They actually work.
Yeah, we were talking about that today, in fact.
No one really knows how.
Patty uses them very successfully.
I've got videos of Patty using the dicing rods inside the museum with Brian standing right there, and they were just really working.
They were all over the place. I remember that.
I've actually got some big ones like she uses, and I can't make it work as good as she does, but they work.
Yeah, it's copper. They're in copper. I want to give the last minute here.
Last year, it's a crazy place.
Darren, I want to give the last minute here for you to just tell the audience how they can reach you if you want them to, or anything that you'd like them to know.
I'm one of these guys in the paranormal that I don't do this for the money. I don't have an agenda other than spreading the knowledge of what goes on with these Ouija communications and what happens when I'm involved and I use a board and the things that I've seen, the things that I've researched. I'm kind of the working man's paranormal guy. You can trust what I say as I have a belief that's based on years and years of experience. And I have a passion for what I do, whether it's painting, whether it's music, or whether it's the paranormal. I go about it 100% with my heart and soul, and I believe in these things, and I find things that are very interesting to certain people, and I will continue to do so and continue to strive to be happy while doing it, and advise you guys to do the same. And thank you so much for being my friend and for having me on.
The feeling is completely mutual. Darren, I can't wait to hopefully get together with you again. I hope this whole thing with
it'll happen.
The Zozo, we'll make it happen.
Send me the form. Let's reach out to Zach and them. This family's having problems.
I'm going to send you the information
and we reached out to Ghost Adventures.
Okay.
It's real.
Yeah, we will do that.
I'll get in touch with you.
Darren, thank you. Father Chris, Brandon, thank you so much. Jamie, thank you. And a big thank you to all of you out there for listening to tonight's show. I really appreciate it. We are what we are today because of all of you, and the listenership is what makes that happen. So make sure you like and subscribe everywhere that you see this show, particularly on YouTube, though. That's where we really need more visibility. And so please do that. Next week, we'll be talking about a brand new topic with a brand new guest, religious trauma. You don't want to miss this one. This is going to be very unique, not something that we've ever covered in any capacity before, and it's something that does come up a lot. It's on a lot of people's minds. It leads to atheism and every other kind of problem that you might see if you are a minister like I am. Anyway, we'll be dealing with that next Tuesday. Until then, I will see you out there in the ether. God bless everybody.
God bless, guys.